I was 32 when the nightmare started again, but the thing that caused them happened when I was 9. By then, my mother had already told herself it was just a strange memory, and my father had decided I made the whole thing up. I tried for years to believe them. It was easier than believing what I remember. When I was 9, my family moved to a small town at the edge of a big patch of woods. My parents were trying to fix their marriage with a fresh start. I only cared that I finally had a yard and trees and a place to ride my bike without traffic. The house was an old one-story place with peeling white paint and a leaning wooden fence that separated our yard from the neighbor behind us. On that other side, there was another small house that sat closer to the street. Between the two backyards was a narrow gap of dirt and weeds where the fence had rotted away in spots. The first day we pulled into the driveway, I saw someone watching us through the gap. He was a skinny boy about my age, in a faded blue t-shirt, standing in the shadow between the houses. His hair was too short, like it had been buzzed at home, and he kept one hand on the fence post while he watched my dad carry boxes. He did not wave or call out, just stared. I looked back at him once, then again, expecting him to smile or look away. He did not. His eyes were pale, almost gray, and I remember thinking he looked older than me in some hard way I could not explain. When my mother noticed me standing there, she followed my gaze. The boy noticed her and stepped backward, so the shadow swallowed him. "Friendly neighborhood you picked," my dad joked, but it fell flat. That first night I lay in my new room, with the window cracked open to let in cooler air. I could hear crickets and the distant rush of a highway. Somewhere a dog barked for a long time. It was a different soundtrack than the city apartment we had left behind. I was just falling asleep when I heard a creak from the side of the house, close to my window. The kind of sound old wood makes when someone steps on it. Then a soft scrape, like a shoe on dirt. I froze, staring at the shadow on my ceiling made by the street lamp outside. The sound came again, closer. "Dad?" I called out, my voice thin. No answer. The house went quiet. After a minute, I told myself it was the neighbors or a raccoon and rolled over, pulling the blanket up to my chin. The next morning, when I went out back to explore, I saw the boy again. He was sitting on the other side of the leaning fence, knees pulled up, watching our kitchen door. "Hi," I said, trying to sound casual. His eyes flicked to me. Then he glanced at the house, like he was checking if anyone else was looking. "You just move in." "Yeah, I am Tyler." He hugged his knees tighter. "I am Aaron." We stared at each other for a few seconds. There was a bare patch where 2 fence boards were missing, and we stood there, with that gap between us, like it was a doorway. "You want to come over?" I asked. "I have a new basketball." He shook his head fast. "I am not allowed." "Why not?" He hesitated. "My dad says not to bother people." The way he said "dad" made my chest feel tight. I had heard other kids say it that way, not just as a word, but as something you stayed careful around. From inside my house, my mother called me for breakfast. "I got to go," I said. "You can come play if you want." He nodded once but did not move. Over the next few weeks, Aaron became part of my routine. He never came all the way into our yard, never stepped through the gate. Instead, he would appear at the fence in the late afternoon and watch while I shot hoops or kicked a ball around. Sometimes we talked. He liked to ask questions. What video games I had. What school was like. He said he did not go to school anymore. "Why?" I asked. "My dad teaches me things at home," he said. Then he changed the subject. I never saw his father at first. I only heard him sometimes. Shouting that rolled through the thin walls of their house and drifted between the yards. A heavy voice. Ugly even when I could not make out the words. Whenever that voice started up, Aaron went silent. He would slowly lower himself out of sight of the gap and vanish. After a while, I stopped inviting him to come over because I knew the answer. I just talked to him where he was, leaning on the fence, feeling important because he listened to every story I told like it was the best thing he had heard. One Saturday afternoon, my parents were out front talking to a neighbor about gutters. I was in the back by myself, trying to bounce my basketball off the wall and catch it behind my back. Someone spoke from the shadows by the fence, but it was not Aaron. "You, Tyler." I turned. A man stood in the narrow channel between the houses, in the same place where I had first seen Aaron. He wore a stained white t-shirt and jeans, and his bare arms were covered in washed-out tattoos. His hair was cut short the same way as Aaron, but his eyes were darker. "Yeah," I said. He jerked his head toward his yard. "Come here a second." Every warning teachers ever gave us about strangers flickered through my mind, but technically, he was not a stranger. He was the dad, our neighbor. I stepped closer, only until I could see him better. He smelled like sweat and cigarette smoke. "You been talking to my boy?" he asked. "Yeah, at the fence. You invite him over here." His voice was flat, but there was something just under it that made my stomach twist. I shrugged, suddenly nervous. "Sometimes." He said he was not allowed, so he did not. The man stared at me so long my face started to feel hot. Then he smiled, but the smile never reached his eyes. He told me, "Just remember, he stays on his side. You stay on yours. That is how it works." He reached out and tapped the top board of the fence with a thick finger. "Fence means no. Understand?" I nodded. "Good boy." He backed away, never turning his back on me, and disappeared behind his house. That night, the noises outside my window came back. Slow steps on dirt, a rustle of bushes, the faint click of something against the siding. I lay very still, afraid that if I moved, whoever it was would know I was awake. After a while, there was a soft scratching against the screen of my window. "Tyler." It was a whisper. There was no question who it belonged to. I slid out of bed and crept to the window. My heart beat so hard I could feel it in my throat. When I eased the curtain aside a few inches, Aaron's face was right there, an inch from the glass. I flinched back and almost cried out. He looked worse up close than he ever had at the fence. One eye was ringed with yellow and purple, like an old bruise. There was a fresh red mark on his cheek. "Let me in," he whispered. "Please, just for a second." I tried to open the window more, but it stuck. My hands were shaking so bad the frame rattled. "What are you doing here?" I hissed. He kept glancing back toward his own house. In the faint light from the street, I could see that his feet were bare and there was dirt on his shirt. "I cannot go back inside yet. He said he is going to fix me." "Who?" Aaron stared at me like I had asked the dumbest question on earth. "My dad. You have to let me in." Just then, a floorboard creaked in the hallway outside my room. My mother coughed, and I heard the toilet flush. If she came in and saw a boy outside my window in the middle of the night, if his father found out, I had no idea what would happen. "Go to the front porch," I whispered. "I will try to get the door." Aaron shook his head so hard, his teeth clicked. "He will see me. He always sees." Voices started up in his house. Loud, slurred, words I could not understand. A bottle clinked against something. Aaron flinched. His eyes went shiny. "Please, Tyler." I wanted to pull the whole window out and drag him in by the shoulders. Instead, I just stood there. From down the hall, my dad's voice rumbled, half asleep. "Tyler, you up." I panicked. "You have to go," I whispered. "Come back in the morning. I will talk to my parents. They will help." He stared at me for 1 second, then 2. Then his face shut down in this blank way that I still see when I close my eyes. "Okay," he said. He backed away into the shadows, the sound of his bare feet in the dirt fading quickly. By the time my dad opened my door, I was in bed, pretending to sleep. He told me to stop playing around and close my eyes. I lay there feeling the guilt sit in my chest like a stone. In the morning, I went straight to the kitchen and tried to tell my parents about Aaron. I told them he was scared, that his dad hit him, that maybe we should call someone. My mother frowned and said I should not make up stories about people I barely knew. My father said kids exaggerate and maybe his dad just yelled a lot. I said he had come to my window. My dad's expression changed at that. He came into our yard at night. I nodded hard. "That is not okay," my dad said. "I will talk to him." He got up and went to the back door, jaw set. I followed, my stomach buzzing with nerves. When he opened the door and stepped onto the porch, the first thing we both noticed was the silence. No cartoons playing next door, no music. The windows of the other house were dark. Later, I would know why. My dad walked to the fence and shouted hello a few times. No answer. He turned back to me. See, no one is even there. Probably just a dream, Ty. I knew it had not been a dream. But the moment passed, and adults have a way of making you feel like your memories are soft and bendable. Still, I refused to let it go completely. I watched the fence that day and the next. On the third day, I saw the boy again. He was in the narrow space between the houses, sitting on the ground with his back against the wall. His arms were wrapped around his knees, and his face was turned toward the dirt. Aaron, I called in a loud whisper. He did not look up at first. When he did, his eyes seemed wrong, almost glassy. You okay? He nodded slowly. You do not come outside anymore, I said. He blinked. I am not supposed to. The bruise around his eye had faded, but there were new marks on his forearms, round and ugly, like someone had pressed something hot against his skin. You can come to my yard, I said. I will tell my dad. He shook his head. He ain't your dad, he said finally. My throat tightened. What does that mean? Aaron stared at me a long time before he answered. My real dad left when I was little. Mom brought this one home and said he was my new dad. He is not. He just lives here. He looked over his shoulder, toward the back door of his house. He likes to watch from the window, Aaron said. When you think you are alone out here, he stands back where you cannot see the glass, and he watches. A chill ran up my spine. Why? Aaron shrugged. He says he is making sure you do not mess around with his fence, but that is not why. Before I could ask what he meant, I heard that heavy voice call his name from inside. The boy flinched like he had been shot. I have to go. He scrambled up and disappeared. That night, the noises outside my window changed. They were not hesitant anymore. The steps were solid, confident. The scratching at the screen was more like a slow dragging this time. Tyler, it was not Aaron. The voice was deeper, but forced into a whisper that made my skin crawl. Tyler, open up. We need to talk. Every hair on my body stood up. I did not move. I see you awake in there. My heart felt like it would burst out of my chest. I wanted to scream for my dad, but my jaw would not unlock. The screen rattled. Metal strained. Then there was a pop and a soft thud as the screen fell outward onto the grass. The window itself was still closed. A pale shape moved just beyond the glass. A face, too close, features distorted. The man smiled at me, his teeth small and uneven. Scared you, he mouthed. Then he laughed under his breath so softly that if I had not been so focused, I might have missed it. His hand came up, and he pressed his fingers to the window, tracing slow circles near my face. His eyes moved over my room, taking in everything. You tell your daddy I've been coming around. I managed the smallest shake of my head. Good. That is smart. He leaned in until his nose almost touched the glass. You and my boy. You sneak around, talking about me. My lungs burned. I had told my parents some things. Had that somehow gotten back to him? He tilted his head, watching my panic with something like amusement. Do not worry. I took care of it. He said it calmly, like he was talking about fixing a leak. Then he stepped back into the dark and was gone. I stayed awake until morning, staring at the empty square where the screen used to be. When it was light enough, I ran to my parents' room. I told them he had tried to get in, that he had ripped the screen off. My father went outside, stomped around, came back in with the bent frame in his hand. He was furious. This is it, he said. I am calling the police. They came out and talked to my parents in the kitchen. I listened from the hall, only catching pieces, prior complaints. They knew the man. They had been there before for loud noises and arguments. They walked over to his house and knocked for a long time. No one answered. They said they would file a report and that we should keep our doors and windows locked. For 3 days, nothing happened. I did not see Aaron at the fence. I did not hear shouting. The other house sat dark, curtains drawn in the middle of the day. On the 4th day, a smell drifted over the fence. It was sickly, sweet, and heavy. Flies buzzed around our back porch. My mother called someone again. This time, more officers came. An ambulance. A white van. They were in the neighbor's yard a long time. When they brought the stretchers out, they were covered. One was adult size. One was smaller. My mother pulled me away from the window and told me to go to my room. I heard her crying in the hall later, her voice low as she talked to my dad. Words like, "Too late, and we should have believed him," and "Oh God." I stared at my bare window frame and tried to understand that Aaron would never appear at the fence again. In the days that followed, adults talked in hushed tones. I caught pieces of the story my parents tried to hide from me. Gas line, faulty heater, a leak in the night, accident. That was the official version. Years later, when I was old enough, I looked up the old news articles. Only a few short paragraphs. A man and his stepson found dead in their home from an apparent gas leak. No foul play suspected. That line is the one that always sticks in my head. No foul play suspected. I remember the empty look in Aaron's eyes at the fence, the burns on his arms, the way he begged to come in my window, and I turned him away. I remember the quiet satisfaction in the man's whisper when he said he had taken care of it. People tell me memory distorts things, that kids misunderstand what they see, that maybe Aaron died in an accident and the rest is my guilt filling in the blanks. Maybe, but some nights, when I visit my parents and stay in that old room, I wake up to the faint sound of steps in the dirt outside the wall. Not the heavy ones from back then, lighter ones, bare feet. Sometimes I hear a soft voice, right at the edge of sleep. Tyler. It does not sound angry, just tired. I lie there and stare at the window, which now has a new screen and a lock my dad installed himself. I tell myself that everything that happened is over. The neighbor's house is empty. The fence is new. The yard is safe. Then I remember how Aaron told me his father liked to stand just out of sight and watch. Every time I feel that presence outside the glass, I know exactly which one of them I hope it is. When I was 10, my family lived on a quiet street that curved around a shallow hill. The houses were close enough that you could hear lawnmowers on Saturday mornings and parents calling kids inside for dinner. It was the kind of street adults like to talk about as safe. I believed them until the summer I noticed the boy in the basement window across from us. His house sat lower on its lot than ours. From my bedroom window on the second floor, I could look straight into one narrow basement room. The glass was old and rippled at the edges, and a thin curtain hung crooked across the top. Most days it looked empty. A bare bulb, a floor of concrete, a mattress folded against a wall. One night in early June, I woke to a tapping sound. I remember thinking it might be a branch hitting my window, even though there were no trees that close. I sat up, rubbed my eyes, and looked out. The boy was standing in the basement window, staring up at me. He looked my age, maybe a year older. His skin was pale in the way of someone who did not go outside much. His hair was dark and messy. His hands were pressed to the glass. When he saw me looking back, he nodded once, a quick jerk of his chin, like he had been waiting for me to wake up. I froze, unsure if I was dreaming. He pointed at me. Then he pointed at the basement door behind him. He made a motion like turning a knob. Then he pressed a finger to his lips. I whispered what then felt stupid because he could not hear me. He held up both hands with his fingers spread, showing the number 10. Then he curled his hands into fists. Then he held up 5, 10, then 5, 10, 15. I nodded slowly. He stepped back, letting the curtain fall. I sat awake until my alarm clock glowed 10:15. Then I crept to the window again. He was there. Same place. Hands pressed to the glass. He mouthed 2 words. "Help me." My stomach twisted. I wanted to run to my parents' room, but something in his expression made me stop. It was not fear exactly, more like resignation, like he had tried this before and hoped maybe this time someone would listen. I raised a hand and tried to signal back. "What do you need?" He pointed upward, at me. Then he pointed to the side, toward the street between us. Then he pointed behind himself again. His motions grew frantic. He shook his head hard. Something is wrong down here. A shape passed behind him, a shadow that moved across the far wall of the basement. The boy's face tightened. He stepped away from the glass fast and ducked out of sight. I flinched back from my own window, heart hammering. Nothing else happened that night. The next morning, I watched the house across the street. I expected police cars or shouting or something dramatic. Instead, I saw a man carry a box to a truck. He was tall, thick around the middle, with a heavy beard and a stiff walk. He loaded the box into the truck bed, went back inside, came out with another box. No sign of the boy, no sign of anyone else. Later that morning, I decided to go outside. I rode my bike in slow circles on the sidewalk. Each time I passed the house, I looked for movement in the basement window. Nothing. When the man came out again, he stopped when he saw me. His eyes were small and deep-set. He watched me without smiling. "You live up there, kid." I nodded. He looked at my bike. "You stay on your side of the street. Those are the rules." I did not know what to say. I muttered a quiet okay and pedaled away as calmly as I could. That afternoon, I told my mom I thought maybe there was a boy kept in the basement across the street. She laughed gently and said, "Sometimes kids imagine things when they move to new places." When I insisted, she said the man was a widower who worked nights and handled estate cleanouts. She said the basement window just looked lower because of the way the yard sloped. I did not argue, but that night I stayed awake watching that window. At 10:15, the light inside flicked on. The boy appeared again. His lip was split. One of his eyes was swollen. He lifted his shirt slightly to show a bruise that wrapped around his ribs like a purple belt. I pushed my window open quietly. "Do you need me to call someone?" I whispered. He shook his head violently. His eyes darted to the stairs behind him. He pressed both palms to the glass. Then he traced letters on the window. It took me a minute to understand. Door. Unlocked. Behind him the shadow passed again. He stiffened. The light went out. His face disappeared. I lay awake shaking until morning. The next night I waited again. At 10:15 the light turned on. The boy was not there. Instead, the man was standing in the window, staring up at me. His smile was thin and stretched too wide. He raised one hand and tapped the glass 3 times with one knuckle. Tap, tap, tap. Then he mouthed the sentence so clearly I still hear it in my head. "I see you watching." I fell backward off my bed and hit the floor so hard my teeth clicked. By the time I got up, the window was dark again. I told my dad the next morning. Not everything, but enough. I said the man scared me, that he watched me at night, that I thought a kid lived there and needed help. My dad sighed and said I had a wild imagination. He walked across the street later that day to talk to the man while I watched from our porch. I could not hear what they said, but I saw the man smile, that thin smile again. My dad came back looking embarrassed. He said, "You have been staring in his windows at night," my dad told me. "You cannot do that. People do not like being spied on." I tried to tell him the boy had asked me to watch, that someone was hurting him, but my dad held up a hand. "No more stories." He said it in the tone that ended conversations. That night I considered sleeping in the living room. Instead, I sat at my window with my lights off. I kept telling myself that if something happened and I was not watching, I would never forgive myself. The light in the basement snapped on. The boy was back. He held something against the glass. A small cardboard sign. Marker letters. My breath caught when I read it. "He is going to kill me." I pushed up my window. "I am going to get my parents," I whispered. He shook his head so hard I thought he might fall. "He will hear. He always hears." Behind him there was movement. A heavy footstep on concrete. The boy flinched. Then I heard something I had never heard before. A low voice drifting up through the night air. The man was talking to him, calmly, too calmly, like someone talking to a dog that had chewed something it should not have. "You do not talk to the neighbors. Remember the rule. You do not talk unless I say you can." The boy's shoulders pulled tight. He stared straight up at me. His lips barely moved as he mouthed 2 words. "Not safe." Then the light went out again. I could not stop shaking. I wanted to call the police, but I knew my parents would hear. I sat in bed with my hands over my ears until I fell asleep by accident. The next morning, I woke to sirens. 2 police cars. One ambulance. People gathered on the sidewalks. My dad was already outside talking to one of the officers. My mom kept trying to stop me from going out, but I slipped past her. They brought someone out on a stretcher, covered with a sheet. Then another smaller stretcher, also covered. My throat closed. I heard a neighbor talking quietly to another. The man had been found unresponsive in his recliner. Carbon monoxide. A faulty vent in the basement. They said he never woke up. The second body belonged to a teenage relative who had been staying with him for the summer. They did not give a name. They did not need to. I told the police everything. Every detail. Every night. Every signal. They wrote things down and nodded and said I had been brave. One officer put a hand on my shoulder and said, "Sometimes we see what we want to see because we are scared." When I insisted the boy had asked for help, he gave me a sad look. "Kid, if there was someone alive down there, we would have found them." But I knew what I had seen. I knew the bruises on the boy's body. I knew the way he looked at me through the glass. I knew the fear in his eyes. I knew he was real. After the house was cleared out, the basement window was boarded over. A for sale sign went up. People walked by and shook their heads at the tragedy. For years I tried to convince myself the officers were right, that maybe I had misunderstood, that maybe the boy had already died before I ever saw him, and my brain filled in details to explain sounds in the night. But I remember the tapping. I remember the cardboard sign. I remember the man smiling at me. I remember the way the boy's breath fogged the glass. 2 years ago, I visited my parents for a weekend. The house across the street had been sold and remodeled. Kids ran through the yard. A new basement window looked out onto the grass. That night, long after everyone had gone to bed, I stepped into my old room and looked out. The basement light across the street flicked on. A shape moved into the window. A face. Pale. Eyes too familiar. The boy looked up at me. Then he lifted one hand and tapped the glass 3 times. Tap, tap, tap. I stepped back, hands shaking. He did not hold a sign this time. He only mouthed one sentence before the light snapped off. "You saw me." When I was 35, I managed a small self-storage facility on the edge of town. It was the kind of place you drive past without noticing. A long row of metal buildings painted a sick shade of beige. A front office with a sliding glass window. A keypad at the gate that beeped too loudly. Most days were boring, in a comforting way. People came in, people left. I swept the hallways, checked locks, and drank too much gas station coffee. Nothing strange ever happened there until the winter a family rented Unit 128. The father filled out the paperwork in silence. His name was Thomas Hale. His wife stood behind him holding a cardboard box, her knuckles white around the edges. A girl around 13 hovered close to her side. Her hair covered most of her face and she kept one hand pressed tightly against her left ear. Most customers are distracted or tired or rushed. This family looked frightened. I tried to talk a little. Weather, small talk, holiday plans. None of it landed. When I asked if they needed a unit with climate control, the mother shook her head sharply. "No, the regular one is fine," meaning the cheaper ones. The dark ones. The ones that stayed cold, even in the summer. I gave them a map and a temporary code, and watched them drive through the gate in an old SUV packed to the roof with boxes. That should have been the end of it. But the next night, just after 10, the gate beeped again. I had already locked the office and was doing my last rounds of the property. The Hale SUV rolled in with no headlights on until the last second. It crawled down the middle lane toward Unit 128. I watched from a distance. People break rules all the time. Storing stuff at night. Coming after hours. Usually, I just remind them to stick to posted hours and leave it at that. But something about the way that SUV approached the unit made me stay still. The headlights swept across the row of roll-up doors like they were searching for something. The vehicle stopped at 128. The father got out and opened the unit. Inside, I saw nothing but stacked boxes and a piece of furniture covered with a sheet. The mother stayed inside the car. The girl stepped out slowly. She kept that hand pressed tight against her ear as if blocking a noise that only she could hear. Thomas opened the back door of the SUV and lifted out another box. The girl whispered something. He froze. Then he shut the door again, without taking anything out. He walked to the girl and crouched in front of her. The words were too far away to hear, but the tone was pleading. The girl shook her head. Hard. Finally, Thomas nodded once. He led her to the open storage unit. She stopped at the threshold. Her whole body went stiff. Then she pointed inside. Her mother yelled something from the SUV. A single sharp word that echoed. Thomas grabbed the girl by the shoulders and pulled her back. She stumbled and nearly fell. The mother jumped out to steady her. They loaded up fast after that. Slamming unit door. Lock snapping shut. SUV squealing out of the gate with its tires slipping on the cold asphalt. I stood there, staring at the padlock on Unit 128. Something about the way the girl pointed bothered me. I could still see her finger extended. A single small hand aimed into an empty unit, like she was pointing at someone she could see, and I could not. The next morning, I checked the cameras. The angle on that row is not great. I could see the father, the mother, the girl. I watched as she pointed into the unit. Nothing was visible inside but darkness. I rewound and watched again. In the still frame, the girl's face was visible for a moment as she pointed. Her eyes were wide and wild, and fixed on something deep inside the unit. Her mouth was open like she was in mid-scream, but the audio did not pick up anything. I told myself not to think too hard about it. People panic. Families fight. Kids have fears that do not make sense to adults. I had no reason to get involved. That held true for 2 days. On the third night, the unit alarm went off. Every unit has a motion sensor tied to the office. When a door is opened without a correct code, the alarm chirps on my panel. Usually, it means someone punched in the wrong number, or used a stolen code. Or a tenant forgot to close their door all the way and wind rattled it open. But this alarm was strange. It sounded at 2 minutes past midnight. The security system showed Unit 128 as open, but the gate had not opened. No cars had entered. No one had punched any code at all. I grabbed my flashlight and radio and walked the row. All the units were closed tight, except 128. The metal door was rolled up halfway. A cold wind blew out of the dark interior and into my face like the breath of a freezer. I pulled the door all the way up. The first thing I noticed was the smell. Cold metal mixed with something sour and sharp. Not rot exactly. More like old water left in a bucket too long. The boxes were stacked neatly along the walls. The sheet-covered furniture stood untouched. Nothing appeared disturbed. I stepped inside with the flashlight. My breath fogged in front of me. The beam lit the concrete floor and the boxes. I swept it across the ceiling. Nothing. Then I heard the sound. A faint tapping from the back corner, as if someone was knocking from behind the wall. I froze. The light trembled in my hand. The tapping came again. 5 slow knocks. Then silence. I stepped backward until I was outside the unit. My instincts screamed to pull the door down and walk away. But if there was someone inside the building structure, a person trapped or hurt, I would be responsible. I called the after-hours maintenance line and reported possible animal activity. That was the best lie I could come up with. Then I waited in my office with the lights on until morning. The next day, I inspected the unit with the maintenance tech. We tapped the walls, checked for rodents, looked for water leaks. Everything seemed normal, too normal. The Hales did not come back that day, or the next. On the 5th day, I called the emergency contact on file. No answer. I left a message explaining there had been an issue with their unit and they needed to check on it. They did not call back. That night, I dreamed about the little girl pointing into the dark. In the dream, her arm extended farther than it should have. Her finger bent in a way fingers do not bend. And she whispered something I could not quite hear. A single begging word. Please. I woke covered in sweat. Around 3 in the morning, the alarm went off again. Unit 128. I refused to go alone. I took a long metal pole we used to unstick jammed doors and walked the row with every light on. My breath plumed in the cold air. When I reached 128, the door was open again. This time only a few inches, just enough to show the black gap at the bottom. I crouched and shined my flashlight under the door. 2 bare feet stood just inside the unit. Small feet, child-sized. The toes were pale and still. I jerked backward, tripping over my own boots. The flashlight skittered across the pavement. I scrambled up and grabbed it. When I aimed the beam again, the feet were gone. I swallowed hard and yanked the door open. Empty. Just the cold metal space and boxes stacked the same way they always had been. Not a footprint, not a mark. The concrete was clean and smooth. I stepped in, my heart pounding so loud I felt it in my fingertips. The smell hit again. Old water. Rust. Something stale like it had been trapped a long time. In the far back corner, a single cardboard box had been pulled forward, just enough to be noticeable. I approached it slowly. The top flaps were open. Inside was something wrapped in newspaper. My hand shook as I peeled away the top layer. A framed photograph. I pulled it out carefully. The girl. The same girl from the window. Younger by a few years. Smiling in a way I had never seen her smile. Her hand rested on her mother's shoulder. Her father stood behind them. I stared at the picture. Then I felt the shift of air behind me. A small voice spoke from the doorway. "You cannot help her." I spun around. Thomas Hale stood there. He looked older than he had the day he rented the unit. His face was drawn. His clothes hung off him. His eyes were red from crying or lack of sleep. He stepped inside and shut the door behind him. "She is gone," he said. His voice cracked. "We tried to move. We tried everything. But she always comes back here." He looked around the unit with a strange mix of grief and fear. "This place is where she died," he said softly. My chest tightened. He kept talking, the words pouring out like they had been trapped inside him. It was an accident. A real accident. She was helping me pack. I stacked a piece of furniture wrong. It fell. She was right under it. My wife called for help, but it was too late. His voice broke completely. "We thought leaving the house would change things. But every night she wakes us. Every night she points at something we cannot see. Every night she begs us to go back to this place, like she is stuck here. Like she is trapped in the moment it happened." His eyes filled with tears. "I saw you watching from across the row that first night," he said. "I thought maybe she wanted your help. Maybe she thought you could see her. But that made it worse. She started showing up more." He rubbed his face with both hands. "We tried a priest, a counselor, a medium. Nothing stops her. She keeps coming back here." He looked around the unit again. "We cannot keep doing this." Before I could respond, he walked to the doorway and looked up at the metal track of the roll-up door. I tried to stop him. He pulled the chain and yanked the door down with all his weight. The slam echoed down the row. For a second, the unit went completely dark. Then I heard it. A soft tapping from behind me. 5 slow knocks. I turned around, flashlight beam shaking. In the back corner of the unit, a small figure stood. The girl, skin pale, hair falling over her face, one hand pressed to her ear, the other pointed at me. Her eyes were wide and full of something that was not anger and not sadness. Something colder, like she was begging for release from a place she could not leave. I backed toward the door and grabbed the handle. It would not move. The girl stepped closer. Her bare feet made no sound on the concrete. She pointed at the boxes, then at the metal shelving, then at the place where the furniture had once stood. She whispered something, so faint I felt it more than heard it. "Still here." I yanked the door again. Thomas grabbed the chain from the outside and pulled. The door screeched upward. Light rushed in. I stumbled out. He slammed the unit shut behind me and locked it. His hands shook so badly, he dropped the keys twice. We both stood there without speaking for a full minute. Finally, he said, "There is nothing else we can do." He walked away without looking back. 2 weeks later, the Hale family moved out of town. Unit 128 sat unpaid for 3 months. Company policy required us to auction abandoned units. On the morning of the auction, I went to cut the lock. It was already cut. The door stood cracked open. Inside the unit, the boxes were gone. Everything gone. Every trace of the family. The floor had been swept. The smell was gone. In the center of the unit lay a single item. A small framed photograph. The same one I had found in the box. The girl in the picture looked straight into the camera with a smile so bright it hurt to look at. Someone had pressed a hand against the glass. A small print, barely visible. I picked it up. The temperature in the unit dropped. My breath fogged. A faint tapping came from somewhere deep inside the wall. 5 slow knocks. I left the photograph on the floor and backed out of the unit. We sealed 128 the next day. Management ordered it welded shut. No more rentals. No more problems. The reason on the official paperwork was structural damage. Now it is just a metal door with no handle. Every morning I see it when I walk the rows. Every morning I feel the weight of eyes from somewhere behind it. Some nights, when I stay late, I hear tapping again. Always 5 slow knocks. People ask me why Unit 128 is closed. I tell them it is unsafe. And it is. But not for the reasons they think. When I was 8, my parents rented a small single-story house on the edge of a quiet neighborhood. It looked normal from the outside. Beige siding, 2 bedrooms, a short driveway, a backyard with crushed leaves, and a sagging chain-link fence. Nothing about it seemed unusual until the first week we moved in and I discovered the hallway closet. It was narrow and deep, wedged between my bedroom and the bathroom. The door was old wood with 6 panels and a tarnished round knob that stuck when you tried to turn it. The closet smelled like dust and old books. The shelves sagged a little. My mom called it perfect for towels. My dad called it extra junk space. I never called it anything because the first time I opened it I felt something watching me from the back. Not a person, not a shadow, just the unmistakable awareness of eyes where there should not have been any. At first, I blamed the smell, or the dim light, or the way the closet stretched deeper than it should, like someone had built the house around a space they did not want to look at. But when I reached in to touch the wall, I swear the air in there felt warmer than the hallway behind me. I closed the door fast. That night, lying in bed, I heard something move in the hallway. Not walking, not talking, more like a slow drag against wood, a fingertip maybe, or nails. The sound stopped right outside my room. Then I heard a soft click, like a doorknob turning. I turned on my side and stared at my closed bedroom door until my vision blurred. In the morning, I checked the hallway closet again. The door was cracked open 1/2 inch. My mom swore she had not touched it. My dad said the house was old and doors shift. They did not hear the scraping sound the night before. They did not hear anything. The next few days were normal, mostly. I would walk past the closet and feel a pressure in the air, like something leaning forward in the dark. My mom put towels on the top shelf. My dad stuffed a few tools under the bottom shelf. They didn't seem bothered. On the 6th night, the scraping started again. Slow, even. A pause between each, sound like something was thinking. I pulled my blanket over my face and told myself it was branches outside, even though we had no trees near the hallway. When the doorknob clicked, I held my breath. My room stayed silent. The hallway stayed dark. Eventually, the scraping faded. I told myself in the morning that it was a dream. Then, while brushing my teeth, I saw something inside the closet. Bare footprints. Small ones. Not toddler small. Not adult small. About the size of a grown man's feet, but narrower. They were faint, made from dust shifting on the floor, like someone had stepped backward into the deeper part of the closet. I showed my mom. She said I tracked dirt in. I showed my dad. He said dust settles in weird ways in old houses. But that afternoon, when we were all in the living room watching TV, the hallway closet door creaked open by itself. A slow, steady swing, like someone inside the closet had pushed it with their palm. My mom turned off the TV. My dad stood up. We all looked at that doorway. The air in the hallway seemed heavier. A cold draft slid across the carpet. My dad muttered something under his breath and walked over to close it. When he put his hand on the knob, he jerked back like it shocked him. He forced a laugh. Metal is cold, but his face said otherwise. That night the scraping returned earlier. I was not asleep yet. I heard it clearly. A long drag down the inside of the closet door. Then another, like fingernails pulled slow across wood. I sat up in bed, heart pounding. The doorknob turned. Click. I heard the soft whisper of the door opening. The closet was only 6 steps from my bedroom door. I slid off my bed and crouched on the floor, watching the line of light under my door. For a minute, nothing moved. Then a shadow passed across the bottom gap. Someone was standing in the hallway. I clapped my hand over my mouth to keep from screaming. The shadow paused. Then it moved slowly toward my room. It stopped right in front of my door. I could see the shape of bare feet, not my dad's. He walked heavier, not my mom's. These feet stood wrong, too still, too quiet. I froze completely. The doorknob to my bedroom shifted, just barely. Once, then again. My door was locked from the inside. My parents installed the lock after I had a nightmare once. The knob rattled softly. A testing sound. Not desperate, not hurried. Patient. After a long moment, the feet turned away. Slow steps padded back toward the closet. Then I heard the closet door close. In the morning, the hallway looked normal. No footprints. No marks. No sign anything had happened. I did not tell my parents. Not because I did not want to, but because I knew they would not believe it. A week passed without anything happening. I stopped checking the closet. I avoided the hallway at night. My parents seemed more tired than usual, snapping at each other over small things. Then, one rainy Saturday night, something changed. I woke to voices, my parents' voices, arguing in the hallway. I sat up fast. The house was dark, except for a faint glow under my door. My dad's voice was tight. "I told you someone is in there." My mom's voice was shaky. "No one is in the closet. You are scaring him." Then a heavy thud. Something hitting the closet door. My dad cursed. My mom gasped. I rushed to my door and cracked it open. My parents stood in the hallway facing the closet. My dad held a flashlight in one hand. My mom stood behind him, gripping his arm. The closet door trembled. I saw it clearly. Like someone inside was pressing against it. Thump. Thump. My dad stepped closer. My mom pulled him back. Then the door flew open. The force was so strong, the knob hit the wall with a crack. My dad jumped back, raising the flashlight. The beam swung across the inside of the closet. Nothing there. Just shelves, towels, tools. But the back wall looked wrong, bowed slightly, as if a space behind it was pushing forward. My mom grabbed me and held me close. My dad stepped inside the closet. He touched the back wall and swore. It was warm. The rest of the house was cold from the rain. That patch of wall felt like someone had pressed their entire body against it. My dad forced himself to laugh. Heat leak. Insulation issue. But the laugh broke halfway through. They closed the door and we slept in the living room that night. The next day, my dad bought a metal hasp and a new lock. He drilled it into the closet door. When he shut the door and snapped the lock closed, the entire hallway seemed to breathe out. That night, for the first time in weeks, I slept soundly. But at 3 a.m, I woke to a metallic clicking sound. Click. Pause. Click. I slid off the couch and peeked into the hallway. The closet lock was bending. The metal hasp pulled forward and trembled, like something inside was yanking it. My dad came running, half awake, shouting. The metal screws popped out of the wood. 1, 2, 3. The lock fell to the floor. The closet door swung open slowly. My dad shined the flashlight inside. Still nothing. Still empty. But the warm air poured out like breath. The smell was wrong now, like sweat soaked into old wood. My dad slammed it shut and held it closed with his whole body. "Call someone," he shouted. My mom grabbed the phone. We ended up outside in the driveway waiting for police. The rain had stopped, but the street looked darker than usual. Every house except ours felt asleep. When the police arrived, my dad explained everything. Sort of. He said he thought someone had been hiding in the walls. A squatter, maybe. Someone sneaking in at night. It happened sometimes in old houses. The officers searched every inch of the place. Attic, crawl space, vents, closets, bathroom cabinets. Nothing. Before they left, one of them turned to me, voice gentler. "Have you been hearing things in the walls, buddy?" Houses settle. Pipes knock. Sometimes it sounds like footsteps. I nodded even though I knew the sounds were not pipes. After they left, my mom suggested we stay at a motel. My dad agreed instantly. Before we locked the house for the night, my dad went to the closet to shut it. I stood far away behind him. He reached for the knob, stopped, stared. The closet door was already closed. We had not closed it. My dad put his hand on the knob and whispered something I could not hear. Then he locked the house and we left. We never slept there again. 2 weeks later, we moved out entirely. My parents did not argue about it. They did not explain it. They just said the house was unhealthy and unsafe. We left furniture behind. Boxes, towels, everything in that closet. Months passed. Life returned to normal. I thought about it less, but not never. When I turned 18, I drove past the old house out of curiosity. A new family lived there. 2 kids' bikes on the lawn, curtains in the windows, lights on. But as I rolled slowly down the street, I saw something that made my hands lock on the steering wheel. The hallway closet window. A small rectangular pane of glass next to the front walkway. Its curtain was half open, and someone was looking out. A man, gray skin, thin face, eyes too deep set, standing completely still. His hand rested against the glass. He stared straight at me. I froze. The car idled under me. Then I blinked. He was gone. Just curtains moving in the AC breeze. I drove away fast. I told myself I imagined it, that the house belonged to new people now, that whatever was in that closet was a trick of childhood fear. But last month, late at night, I got a message request on social media from a name I did not recognize. The message said, "Can I ask you something about this house?" Attached was a photo. The hallway, the closet door, closed. Under it, the floor showed faint footprints, bare, narrow, pointed toward the bedroom at the end of the hall. Just like before, I have not responded yet, because if I answer, I will have to tell them the truth. Some closets do not store towels. They store people, people who never left.